I don't find those people to be the ones that grow and become successful. I see it as the people who have that humility, the curiosity, who want to keep learning and growing. What is one of the things that you learned being a CEO of a big company that you didn't know prior to going in? And I said, I would show up at 6 o'clock in the morning and I wouldn't leave until 10 o'clock at night. And I'm not saying I did that forever, but I did it for the first 90 days because I wanted to learn that business inside and out. And I knew that it was a big deal to take that step and that somebody believed in me and gave me that opportunity. We were like 740 million, I think, in 2019, roughly. And when I left in 2025, we grew 1.3 billion. It was
Very nice.
so almost
Congratulations.
double what I learned over those 30 years and going from an entry-level accountant to the CEO of the company. And I tried to share the lessons that I learned. And my line to people who are really smart and have all those things, and maybe they do know everything, I always tell them that's good for you and you're lucky, but the world changes fast too. So you're gonna get blindsided at some point if you just don't open yourself up to that continuous growth.
Welcome back to the Executive Airspace Podcast. I'm your host, John Traub, and today we're joined by a good friend of mine and former Wilson CEO, Joe Dudy. Joe, welcome to the Executive Airspace Podcast.
Thanks, John. I'm excited to be here today, and I appreciate the opportunity to share my journey and some of my learnings over my 30 years at Wilson.
Well, that's exactly what we're looking to do today is to get Joe's insight. He had a great run at Wilson Sporting Goods, broke it down into 3 phases. And now the 4th phase being post-Wilson. We'll talk about that as well. But your journey is really compelling. And that's why I invited you on to tell your story, tell your journey, give us your insights. You've seen a lot in your 30 years. So maybe just start from the beginning and tell us, what you've learned, lessons learned, progress, all of that.
Sure. And I was fortunate to have an extraordinary 30-year journey at Wilson Sporting Goods, and I never planned for it and never anticipated to go where it ended up. And I started as an entry-level accountant, and
Yeah.
nobody finds jobs these ways anymore, but my mom
Right.
actually was reading the Sunday paper
Oh boy.
and, in the classified ads circled, an entry-level accountant and put a little note on there and said that, "No, I think you would be interested in this, you should apply for it. It'd be a great opportunity." And so I did, and that's how I found the job and how I started there.
So Northwest Indiana, early 90s-ish, late 80s?
So I started in 1995,
Yeah.
late
Okay.
late 1995, and really what kicked off the journey was that I didn't do my due diligence. I was just excited to work for a sports company.
Sure.
I was still young, and what I found out when I started there is that the company wasn't doing well, and it was losing money, and it was within the first probably it was definitely earlier than 12 months. In the first 12 months that I was there, they did a major downsizing to reset the cost structure, and they cut almost 1/3 of the employees, and when you're in accounting, you're in the back office, so usually what happens is that 1/3 was even higher. I think it could have been as high as 50% because they tend to keep the revenue, and product people that are driving the sales.
Sure.
They have to protect that. And why that was a huge opportunity that I could have never predicted was that there were fewer people to do, the work that still existed. And I would say if you had the right attitude and you embraced it and you were positive, it was a great opportunity to learn and grow. And in those first 4 years, I was promoted like 4 times. I went from entry-level accountant to manager of corporate accounting to a global financial reporting role pretty quickly in those first 4 years. And then what ended up happening was something that, you know, my wife had an opportunity to move to Orlando for what she called her dream job.
Right.
And I thought my skills were very transferable, so I was agreed to move to Orlando, and I put in a 6-month notice and resignation at Wilson at the time. And what ended up happening though was during that 6 months that I was working to do the transition of the role and get them through, the things that I always said. I called it the no headache plan. If you keep me around for 6 months, fly me back and forth, I'll end up making sure that we get the budget done,
Right.
we get the year-end close done, I'll get you through the audit, you can hire somebody, and then we transition the role. Well, the great thing that happened in that 6 months was that there were some projects that came up internationally, and they gave me a temporary role, only promised 90 days of work, as long as I was willing to get on a plane and travel overseas.
Okay.
And to me, that sounded like another great opportunity. I didn't need
Sure.
the job security. I focused on learning and growing.
Right.
And I thought to myself, I'll just be more valuable if I have this international experience. Well, that 90 days turned into 2.5 years
Yeah.
of me spending 2 weeks overseas all over the world and then 2 weeks back in Orlando. And I learned a lot over that time period about managing finances globally, internationally. I also took on an interim role in Japan where I was the head of finance for our Japan subsidiary for 18 months before they could hand that off to somebody. So if you take that first 4 years during the restructuring and then
Right.
the next 2.5 years that I did in international finance, I built significant skills and capabilities by just taking risks and being open to learn and grow.
And adapting and pivoting, right?
Yes. It was kinda like the thing we talked about the other day, like companies with emergent strategies. It was emergent opportunities that I just embraced and only looked at the opportunities to learn and grow. And where I was fortunate was my dream job with Wilson opened up back in Chicago in, 2000, and I asked my wife if we could move back to Chicago because what it was a divisional CFO
Okay.
for Wilson team sports, which was baseball, softball, soccer,
Right.
football,
Beautiful.
and I was excited about it.
Yeah.
And I worked with a great team and a great leader, and we worked in that role for 4 years. And we were a division though that was underperforming. We were the smallest division, and we were also the least profitable. And there were talks about even maybe getting out of some of those businesses at this time.
Get off. Yeah.
Wilson was primarily tennis and golf
Right.
at that time
Right.
period. But what ended up happening as a team, we tripled our sales in those 4 years, and we became the most profitable division in the company. And I would say that's where I learned more about business than just the accounting and finance capabilities that set me up for a longer term future. But because of that success of the division, the general manager of that division became the president and CEO of Wilson Sporting Goods, which when he had the first opportunity to do it, he made me the CFO
Right.
Wilson. So
Great.
in 2005, I had that opportunity. I was only 35 years old. I was one of the youngest, I think, ever CFOs of Wilson.
And that's about the time we first met.
It
We
was.
knew you as CFO Joe
Yes.
in the neighborhood very fondly. Name.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I always say, sometimes people also ask, like, they get impatient with their career growth.
Yeah.
And I sat in that CFO role for 14 years. And, it was impossible to kind of get complacent or not grow because when you're at a senior level in a big global company like that, there's just always things. The world's changing so fast, business is
Sure.
changing. So I was continuing to learn and grow. And I actually worked for two presidents during that time period as one for 8 years and one for 6 years. And I always say I had a front row seat to the business, being able to be their business partners as the CFO. And we did a lot of M&A during that time period, which was exciting. We built one of the strongest baseball portfolios in the industry. We were always known as the Wilson A2000, but
Right.
we had already acquired DeMarini, and then we acquired Louisville Slugger,
Right.
and then we acquired Evo Shield, which is the batting protective company. And all of those had been huge successes. But I did that for 14 years and waited patiently in that seat. And it was an exciting journey and a lot of learning. And then I ended up being fortunate that the president of Wilson at that time in 2019, he had his dream job to leave and be the CEO and president of USTA, which he was a tennis person.
Right.
They run the US Open in New York City or whatever. And so when he stepped down, he recommended me as the next president and CEO of the company. And I did that role from 2019 through 2025. It was a very different perspective of being a CFO to being a CEO. And we really unlocked the growth of the company during that time period too. We were stuck, for almost 2 decades at around 700 to $750 million, and we were doing great things, but it always seemed like as soon as we got some momentum, something bad happened, like the global recession, or there was a bunch of bankruptcies in the sporting goods industry during, like, when Sports Authority
Right.
disappeared, and, so we had some struggles, I'd say, that were external, um, and then we had the pandemic.
Mhm.
That was when I was leading. I ended up getting the role at the end of 2019,
Right, right.
and, call it, like, September of 2019, and then, sports were shut down in March of 2020, which, the funny thing that people always say to me is, "Did you always dream of, being the president and CEO of Wilson?" And I said, "I did, but that dream never had a pandemic in it." So,
That wasn't part of the script, right?
but I will say, and I've talked to somebody who told me the other day, it was a great thing. I was telling the story how, not that I would ever wish for that again, but it was a blessing because
Yeah.
starting out as a CEO of a big global company and then having to go through the crisis of a pandemic, I felt like it accelerated my learning as a CEO then, and I really grew personally and professionally during that time period to lead the company. I don't know if things were kind of status quo, if that transformation would have happened. So
Right.
it really turned into an opportunity
Well,
where,
sure, and it forced everybody to think differently, right?
right,
And maybe to your point, that might not have happened.
yeah.
We've not been forced to.
And it goes back to the adapting
Sure.
that you mentioned earlier, about the career. And one of the things that my team and myself are really proud of is I said we were stuck at about 700 to 750 million for 2
Right.
decades. We were like 740 million, I think, in 2019, roughly. And when I left in 2025, we broke 1.3 billion. It was a
Very nice.
deal. So almost
Congratulations.
double. And then, 2022 was a monumental year. That was the first year in the history of the company that we broke $1 billion in sales. And we had been around since 1914, so well over 100 years to finally, exceed the 1 billion mark as a billion-dollar brand was a historic moment for Wilson.
So then let's go back to maybe phase one. Okay. Admittedly, you're green coming into this. You see this great opportunity, and then you decide to exit. And then this opportunity to go internationally is presented to you. Tell me, how did you process that? How did you succeed?
Yeah, I would say the first thing, which it worked out, but I would say the first thing might have been a mistake to resign and leave, even though it worked out and,
Right.
I had to support my wife and her opportunities.
Sure.
But I think I viewed it more as that there was low turnover in the company. I didn't see the positions that eventually opening. I thought people would be in their roles forever, and I just thought although it was kind of a rocket ship start in growth and learning, I thought, it's gonna be capped. So I took that risk because of that, and it worked out. But I always think, and when I talk to younger students who ask me questions, I always tell them that you need to be patient,
Right.
but there's a balance too. And sometimes you can't stay if you need to continue to grow. And there's just because I work for a company for 30 years doesn't mean that that's the right thing. And it's probably not going to be common. Sometimes you have to leave to grow.
Right.
And we always loved some of our employees. We called them boomerang employees. And there's a lot of them at Wilson Sporting Goods that left because the growth and opportunity wasn't there. And they went somewhere else and continued that growth. And then when something opened back up and it fit their needs and the level where they were at that time, we would bring them back. And those are some of the best employees because they know, what it's like to be somewhere else. The grass isn't always greener on the other side. But also, we only took back the best employees too.
Well, and not only that, but they're coming back with valuable learnings and information, and they've practiced somewhere else now to make the company better.
They
Uh,
come with a
right.
different perspective,
For sure.
different learning, so we're not always just internally learning
And that's
bringing
why,
some of
like,
that
some of the
outside knowledge.
for sure, some of the family businesses that are in place require family members to go and cut their teeth at different companies to bring back that knowledge and that perspective to make the company better. Because if you just have tunnel vision or one way of doing things, you have one way of doing things, right?
Right.
But that's a credit to leadership to understand the value in that.
Yeah. And to me, it was a lot better if you could bring somebody back that you already knew. You knew they were a player
Trust them.
and you trust, and you knew that they went out and had more learnings. That's
Right.
easier to place that bet
Yeah.
on somebody you don't know.
No, for sure.
Um,
For sure.
so those are so that's just one kind of example where I would say, you need to be patient. I was probably not, but it worked out. So the other thing to your question is just embracing that growth. I would always say, one, I was fortunate that I had great people around me that mentored me and I learned from them. But I also think that that takes a humility in an individual to keep yourself open to learning and growing. I've seen kind of too many people who kind of have that fixed mindset
Yeah.
and they don't want to learn and grow, or they're maybe, I don't know if it's an insecurity, but they're afraid to admit, like, they think they have to show up like I know everything and I don't need to learn. And I don't find those people to be the ones that grow and become successful. I see it as the people who have that humility, the curiosity, who want to keep learning and growing. And my line to people who are really smart and have all those things and maybe they do know everything, I always tell them that's good for you and you're lucky, but the world changes fast.
Right.
So you're going to get blindsided at some point if you just don't open yourself up to that continuous growth and learning.
Yeah, and that's a great point. Coming in, just from my perspective, coming into aviation as a mid-50s gentleman, um, I don't know it all. I mean, I know what I did pretty well, but I'm asking questions of people that are 30, 25 years younger than me to learn from them. And they're open to it. They want to help me.
Right.
They would rather have me ask those questions than say, "Oh, I got it," and then learn that I don't got it so much. Yeah, you know what I mean? So,
No, and that brings me to a thought that's really related to that, that when
yeah,
I speak to students at universities and they ask, one of the questions they always ask me is what is one of the things that you learned being a CEO of a big company that you didn't know prior to going in? And I said, I always thought when I was growing up in the company and I was younger and I looked up to the presidents and CEOs of Wilson or any other company, I just wondered how they could know everything and be so smart, and how did they get there? And for me, what was refreshing is when I was in that seat, we had roughly, we shared employees because we were in a portfolio, but we had about 2,000 direct employees. And the way I looked at it, to the thing that you're saying, was I was lucky because I didn't have to be the smartest person. I didn't have to
right.
know everything. I had 2,000 people, and what I had to do is make sure that they felt that they were in an environment that they could be empowered to make decisions, to give their opinions, that I could listen, their managers listen. But to me, that was one of the most powerful things, and it was one of the things I enjoyed most of being a leader.
Well, and that's the sign of being a good leader is knowing that different perspectives matter. Um, I know when I was leading at Comcast, I would try to bring people in from different industries to make us better. I wanted my team to be better than I was.
Yep.
I wanted them to make more money than I did. I wanted to maximize production because if we were all running on all 8 cylinders, boy, we were a machine, and we became that. And so that's a credit to you and your vision to understand that and to get the support from upper management to put those right people in place.
When I first started as the CEO and we made a lot of changes, like I think in the first 12 months, it was something like 60% of the senior leaders were new leaders versus the ones that had been in the seats. And Wilson is a company, it's a great company, great culture, great people. And
Yep.
because of that, the turnover tends to be low. So there's a lot of people who work there 20, 30 years plus.
Sure.
And what I used to say to my new leaders when I brought them in, because sometimes they would feel like, you're going to have it with any company. Oh, this is the way they do things. They don't want to change.
Right.
But I felt like my role as a leader, and one of the things that I would reinforce to my new teammates is that, listen, I have to listen to you or the other leaders. It doesn't matter if you've worked here 2 months or if you've worked here 20 years. I have to listen to you both the same because I have to bring that information in. Now, I have to do some analysis and thinking or whatever, be analytical with it and try to make the best decisions. But I think
Right.
the important thing is to make sure that you're listening and taking that in and really being reflective on what you're learning. And we made decisions as a team mostly. It wasn't just me, but I made sure that those different perspectives ended up influencing our decisions and our actions.
Well, sure. And not only that, but then you are empowering your team to tell you what you need to hear,
Yeah.
right?
And that's a very important thing because some environments are not safe, right? And we took pride at that at Wilson to make sure that we had an environment of psychological safety, I think is the technical term. But
Yeah.
it's that people could feel comfortable expressing their ideas, their opinions, and I can't imagine working somewhere, and I know there's a lot of places where it's not like
Unfortunately.
that.
Yeah.
And I don't know, you can't unlock value or opportunity if people are afraid to speak what they really feel. So I think as a leader, that's something that's really important to make sure that you foster in your environment.
Absolutely. So let's rewind a little bit to the international travel piece. And not only are you executing the game plan, but you're also going to countries you haven't been before, I would assume, right? How did that help you gain the perspective and make you better at your job?
I think the first thing, I mean, it's it was new to me. I think I even needed to get a passport. No, I grew up in Northwest Indiana,
Yeah.
didn't travel a lot, didn't have the opportunities, but, it was a big eye opener for me and to get exposed to different cultures, and then just, one, really realizing we're all the same at the bottom. We all want the same kind of basic human needs, and for me, what I learned is, first of all, like, I was working with numbers. Numbers are numbers.
Right.
So, it was easier even though maybe some of the language barriers might have been there, that working with numbers made that transition for me a little bit easier, but, what what I would say I learned, and this is probably, good advice, for anybody who's leading a global company or works in a global headquarters, one of the things that I found very early was that the teams that are scattered around the world in the subsidiaries feel like they're on an island a lot of times, and they feel disconnected, and I think it reinforces that, you need to make sure that, like, your culture isn't just, like, the headquarters centric or if you're a US company like us, US centric. You need to make sure that you're inclusive and you bring in the whole globe so they feel a part of things, and I think I didn't even realize it, I don't think, until I was the CEO of the company, how important it was when I visited those sites, that the pride they took in it, that it was important to, to interact at every level in the organization to show that respect, and they take a lot of pride in the people who come from the headquarters, and they also wanna feel like they're a part of something bigger that, you need to make sure that you create that environment, and it's
Sure.
it's important, and what I did find, this was early in my career because when I was traveling around in the international finance role, what shocked me is if you don't have sufficient communication globally, these local teams start to make up their own story.
Right.
And I would travel around and I would hear these things like they would say that they heard this or that, or they think we made this decision because of this. And they were so absurd.
It's the game of international telephone, right?
Yeah. So one of the things that I really learned from that too was that it is so important to communicate and make sure that they understand the priorities of the company, also why we're making decisions so they don't create those stories themselves, and then that
Right.
just helps them feel more belonging to.
Yeah, and part of the plan, right? Wanted, recognized, respected, all that.
I mean, one of the things we did very, very early that I don't even think we recognized was we would do company town hall meetings, And this was back before we really transformed the company, and our town hall meetings would kind of be US focused, or they might not even invite everybody globally. I do think what helped that was the pandemic and getting more virtual with using, Team and Zoom
Right.
sites and being able to do things digitally opened it up that we could do global town hall meetings. But we switched everything from being so US centric to making sure that it was inclusive globally, from town hall meetings to manager meetings, any kind of communication.
Right. Well, and we're seeing in our industry as we come out of COVID and the pendulum is starting to swing back to the in-person interaction, conducting a meeting or a call on this is now being replaced by jumping on one of those and going to see the right people and getting in front of having this type of one-on-one interaction.
Right.
So it's starting to come back.
Yeah, definitely. I know, you know, I've been retired for about 9 months, but I know I talk to my colleagues and
Yeah.
they are traveling a lot more again. They're going to the office more often, and I think it's important, and as far as I can tell, is it seems healthy and that they like it and that it's important. And I even have a daughter today starting an internship. Today is her first day. Now she's hybrid and she's gonna be going to the office, but her first day is at home remote. And I can see even starting for a new company and not being physically with people, that the strain that it causes on the other side. I don't know if I had a full appreciation for that because I worked for the same company for 30 years and had all this equity built up in the
Right.
relationships, that if I was in the office or not in the office, I could, still, you know, have all the networking and everything that I needed. But seeing a new person, I think it's so important that the young people get in and get physically,
That
interacting with.
that's critical. And I could just speak for my son when he had his internship, he had the choice of going in 3 days a week to at home. He went in 5 days. Sport coat, first guy there.
I used to see him at the train. He was on my early train, and I was the first guy there too.
Well, there you go. So, and it's no wonder that he was invited back full time when he graduated. So, lesson learned there for sure. Well, let's go back then when your international project is done and you see the role available in Chicago that had the verticals of baseball, softball, and the others.
American football.
Yeah, right. Okay, yeah. So tell me about that and how you tackled that coming back to Chicago.
So I'd say there's 2 key stories to that one. Is the first thing is, and I I didn't wanna let anybody down, and it was a big opportunity, so I worked hard. And I'll tell you what, in those first 90 days, I would show up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I wouldn't leave until 10 o'clock at night. And I'm not saying I did that forever, but I did it for the first 90 days because I wanted to learn that business inside and out. And I knew that it was a big deal to take that step, and that somebody believed in me and gave me that opportunity, that one, I didn't want to let them down and I didn't want to fail.
Yes, sir.
So I think that hard work, I didn't wait for anybody to coach me, teach me. I learned it inside and out. But the other thing that happened that was a really big deal, and I think we talked about this a little bit, where I said, this was off camera, where I was talking about some of my greatest opportunities came from change.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the change, I didn't welcome or ask for. It was just change that was gonna happen. I couldn't let's say it was out of my control.
Sure.
And one of the big things that happened in that job, it was a divisional CFO. I had 22 people reporting to me. We operated as an autonomous business, very different than what Wilson is today. And we were in charge of everything end to end from finance. And I was working there after those 90 days, and the corporate team came in and said, "Hey, we're going to restructure the business and we're going to set up service centers. So you're going to go from 22 people down to 2 people. And you're no longer going to have to do things like closing the books every month or making sure that the bills get paid or collecting receivables. We're going to have service departments that do that for the entire company. But your job now is to work, with the business team to add value and make sure they grow sales and grow profitability, manage working capital and things like that." And that was a big change because there's an ego thing that comes in, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm my first divisional CFO, I have 22 people reporting to me, I'm running the whole, end-to-end finance and accounting for this division, and then they take it away from me in, like, 90 days. And my first reaction was,
Oh boy.
yeah, I was like, "How could you do this
Right.
to me?"
Right.
Um, you probably knew this was coming if you hired me.
They had some idea that was coming. Sure.
So I was upset, I
Yeah.
would say, but luckily I was able to get through that, and I'll say it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me, and I didn't see that on the other side, because what it allowed me to do was, I spent most of my career before that doing accounting and finance, and it took it all off my plate, all the things I knew and that I was comfortable with, and it moved me towards partnering with the business leaders in the business to try to improve the business and to create value. And that was the business unit where I said we tripled the sales and we became the most profitable division in the company. And I don't think without that change I would have ever had that business growth that then set me up to be a CFO. And then the
Right.
CFO, allowed me to be the CEO. And I think the lesson in that is, there's always going to be change that happens. And a lot of times it's out of our control. Is you have to get over that change curve as quickly as possible and accept it and move on, because if I would have been upset about it and showed up every day with the attitude, that was negative, I wouldn't have made it through it, and I would have never, ended up progressing my
Right.
career in the path that it went.
Well, and with that change, did that allow you to reset the table the way that you wanted?
I would say it definitely resetted the table, but I don't know that I was smart enough to know that it was resetting for what I wanted, because
Yeah.
as I've maybe became more self-aware of
Yeah.
myself, I would say I could do the basic administration and closing books and, the accounting kind of nuts and bolts. I would
Yeah.
say I could do it. And I wouldn't say that, now that I've hired people after me to do it, I wouldn't say I was probably the best at it. But what my strength was and where my energy was working with teams and trying to find creative solutions and whiteboarding and trying to find new directions and paths to try to improve the company. And I would say that gave me more energy and got me more excited and made me want to go to work every day than if maybe I was doing the accounting. And again, the accounting isn't that it's not valuable and it's great. It's just what my strengths and weaknesses were. And I know there's other people who get a lot of energy from those things and they don't like the whiteboarding and creativity and solution finding. They sometimes think that that can be BS, right? And
Right.
they have work to do. And one of the things I learned from that was that, you got to surround yourself with the right people too. And for me, what I learned is that we're all not fully complete people, and we don't have all the skills, or there's things that give us energy or things that drain us, and they're vice versa for somebody else. And what I learned very quickly was to surround yourself with the people who complement your skills. And, there's I had a speaker come in one time that spoke to us at one of our offsites, and he explained it the right way. He goes, he was a serial entrepreneur, and he goes, "Well, I'm an idea monkey, which is a solution kind of whiteboarding, creative. That's what I feel like I enjoy the most and what I like."
Right.
But he said the other person you have to complement yourself with is the ringleader, who's the person who actually brings it to life and gets it done and executes. And neither one of them can probably, create a great business separately, because the idea monkey loves the ideas and he moves on to the next idea before he gets
Right.
to the one executed.
Right.
And the person who loves to execute never lifts their head up to make sure that you're heading in the right direction. And they just keep, executing ahead. So if you can work together, that's where you create the real value, where you can make sure, one, that we're doing the right things to make sure we're heading in the right direction long term. But you have that team or the group of people that are the ones who are waking up every day to execute it and make sure that you bring that plan to life.
So, what were some of the ideas then that came out of that led to the integration across the verticals and ultimately the growth?
Yeah, so we were fortunate that just before I became the CEO and president of Wilson in 2019, we had new owners that bought the company in 2018, and we were public on the Helsinki Stock Exchange, and they came in, paid a big premium for the company and privatized us, with a private equity team, and they listened to us, going back to that listening, and the brand presidents had always thought that, we were always set up with portfolio sales, that there was a sales organization that sold everything for all our brands, like Arc'teryx and Salomon and Wilson are the 3 biggest brands. They own more brands than that. But we felt like that was an important function that needed to be close to the brand. It couldn't be shared because the communities and cultures of those sports are very different. I can't send a ski person into a tennis shop. And even within
Right.
Wilson, I can't send a tennis person into a baseball shop or a baseball sales rep into a tennis shop. It just doesn't work. You don't have the credibility, authenticity you need to be in the sport. So we were fortunate we had the new owners and they listened to the brand presidents and made a decision to break this portfolio sales organization up that was at the parent company level, and they called it Brand Direct. It's really vertical integrated sales organizations, and that's what we did, and we built a Wilson sales organization. I even went deeper and built a tennis sales organization, a baseball one, a golf one, and so on. But Arc'teryx had their own, and Salomon, outdoor, ski companies with they had Atomic and Salomon. They had their own sales organization too. And to me, that was one of the big unlocks when I said we doubled that business, from 2019 to 2025. All those brands were on fire after that. There's a lot of things that we did, but I would say to me, without that basic foundation, we would have never unlocked, that growth, and it was really, really important to the success of Wilson and all our sister brands.
And also out of that was the genesis and the birth of the retail locations.
Yes. Yeah, so we had, multiple growth initiatives, and I would say the first thing we focused on was our core equipment because that's what we've been doing for 100 years, and we strengthened all of our equipment with the vertically integrated sales organizations. Then the second thing we did was we retrenched in our tennis business where we've been number 1 for a long time, but we were weakening a little bit, and we really, reset the team. We started to rebuild all those important relationships within the industry, all the stakeholders like our customers, agents, tour players,
Right.
juniors. You have to be in the grassroots and community because
Yep.
you have to get them on your product early. They don't like to switch
So, right.
once they get used to the tennis racket. So we really, um, I would say, strengthened our number 1 position in tennis and racket sports through that. And then one of the big things that even seems surreal to me today is in 2022, we repartnered with the NBA after they had been with another brand for 38
Right.
years. And Wilson became the official basketball of the NBA and the WNBA in 2021, 22. And that was a huge unlock because we had a strong foundation in basketball. We make the Evolution basketball, which all basketball junkies say is the best product in the marketplace. We also had a 2-decade plus relationship with the NCAA to be the official ball of the March Madness. So we had a strong foundation in the US and we were very competitive
Yeah,
there,
we're very
but
visible
it
for sure.
didn't translate outside the US globally. And that's where that MBA business really elevated our brand position and unlocked that global growth. And that business, I mean, it added hundreds and
It's on
hundreds of
fire,
millions of
right?
dollars. Yeah, see, it's good.
No doubt.
Yeah, so, and that's really what we did for our core foundation to make sure that we strengthen and continue to grow that equipment business. But as you said, yeah, we got into retail, physical retail. And really what that came from is I would say core equipment is still always going to be in wholesale. It's going to be multi-brand. People want to shop for equipment in places that they have choices. But the footwear and apparel industry is a little different, and it seems to be more kinda direct to consumer, a lot of, mono brand stores, and we made a decision through our new owners who have, they have significant experience and capabilities in both footwear and apparel, that they they felt, and I would say I agree, that there's only so much growth opportunity in equipment. Equipment is a lot smaller market that's available than apparel and footwear. It's significantly smaller. It's probably not even 10%. I don't know the size, but it's not growing as fast either. And apparel and footwear grows fast. There's more frequency in purchasing because I know you like golf. You buy a set of irons. When's the next time you're gonna buy a set of irons? Right? Like it.
Right.
Can be a long time. Could be over 6 years.
Well, because I can't figure it out. They still slice it into the wood, so it's got to be the golf club's fault, right?
Right. Right. But we made a choice in 2021 to really um, get into apparel and then recommit to our tennis
Yeah.
footwear business. And with that, when you think about the way the consumer wants to shop, it was important to be in those places. So we started more with direct consumer from digital. We opened up our own stores, and then we made a conscious effort too to grow in China. And China is a very fast growing market for, I mean, definitely for footwear and apparel for all brands, but it's also a place where tennis is on the rise. And it's a very direct to consumer and brand store driven business model there. So we've opened I think by the time I left, we were roughly at 13 stores, physical stores that were Wilson owned stores in the United States. And then I think, I know they're probably either got there last year or they're gonna get there this year, but, they probably will be over 100 stores in China.
Wow.
And we're doing some in some other markets, but on a smaller scale, but, that's really the reason why the physical retail is there. I think if we just stayed as an equipment company, it wouldn't have made sense to do that, but when you wanna get into soft goods, it's important 'cause it's the way the consumer wants to shop. It's easier to tell your brand story. It elevates you. What you don't wanna do in apparel is just sell items to a retailer and then you get lost in some mix somewhere. You want to have full assortments and a brand story and an emotional connection to consumers.
Absolutely.
That was why that what drove that decision to get into that area.
Yeah. And the apparel part of it, how did you find the right partner or people to come in and launch that whole initiative?
We definitely went with outside talent because we didn't have it internally.
Right.
And I would say, Chip Wilson is the founder of Lululemon, and there's some other owners, but it mostly started with Chip
Okay.
because he was on the apparel side
Right.
with Lululemon that he had people that he had worked with in the past, and we hired a lot of Lululemon talent from product to how you retail, assortment planning, merchandising, and we went outside with all that. And I would say that we leaned very much towards bringing in leaders from that had left there, and then they brought in a lot of people that they knew.
Again, the vision to look outside for people that know a category better than you instead of you trying to figure it out internally. Really a credit to the decisions that were made by you and the executive team there to build out that vertical.
Yeah, and one of the things we quickly learned, which is, we keep saying adapt, adapt, adapt,
Mhm.
is I would say we made mistakes from the very beginning too, and we learned fast. And we probably in the first year that we dropped an assortment, we went a little too much lifestyle and streetwear, and it was because it's a bigger market and we wanted to be broad, but we didn't have the credibility and authenticity, and the consumer wanted us to be in tennis, and it really grounded us back into retrenching and focusing on tennis apparel and tennis footwear.
Interesting.
And that's where the growth and that is where it's working.
Mm, great. So, where is everything going now when you have, apparel, you have endorsements from athletes, uh, you have all of these things converging. What is the recipe for success for brands now and engaging with the consumer now in 2026?
I would think the thing is where it's going, and it does make it a little hard for Wilson because equipment and soft goods are very different, how you approach them. And
Right.
I think the simplest way to think about equipment is that it isn't really as much of kind of marketing and brand's important, but what trumps it in equipment is basically performance and trust. Like, if you're a baseball player and you think you can hit a home run with a DeMarini bat, you're gonna buy DeMarini bats. I don't care if you're loyal to another bat brand. So it's very hard in equipment because you gotta continue to come out and innovate every year and make sure that you make the best performing products in tennis rackets, and there's loyalty, but I would say the loyalty is weaker than maybe like in soft goods because you're not looking so much as performance, even though, I'd say apparel has gotten more technical and it's moved closer to equipment as needing performance and technical, but apparel still is more about the emotion, the brand I wear, and what it says about me, and what does it identify me. So they're very hard, and that's a challenge that Wilson has to bring together. And I think for equipment, it's more about what you do and it's how you show up more than saying what you do, which I would call marketing.
Right.
Where in soft goods, there's a little bit more of the marketing and making sure that you're visible on tour. Not I should say on equipment, it's important to be visible on tour too. It provides credibility
Right.
that drives that trust. But I would say just in general for all brands though, where it's going and is so important is that you have to be authentic to who your brand is, and you better pick a position and stick to it and be disciplined about it. I think the brands that get hurt are the ones that they they don't choose who they are and they try to be everything to everybody, and then their brand gets diluted and they don't mean anything, so
And you're nothing to nobody.
so they get lost, exactly.
Right.
The brands that are really good about it are the ones that they're very specific and they're disciplined in how they engage with the consumer, how they show up to be authentic to whoever that consumer is. Their values are aligned. The consumer and the brand values are aligned, and you have to be that.
This is who we are. This is what we do. And this is how we do it.
Yeah, and you're not going to get everybody,
Right.
but at least you'll get that market because I think when you get lost, it's hard to get that back.
Absolutely. And for the business owner or the entrepreneur that's listening or watching, that's so important to have that integrity,
Yes,
right? And sometimes you find yourself trying to be everything to everyone and not having a discipline to understand this is the lane that we're good at. Let's stay in this lane,
right.
right? I think that's something that you've learned throughout your career. This here are the lanes. Let's stay in it. And then when it's time to change lanes, let's make sure we have the right people either internally. If we don't, let's bring them in from the outside.
Right. And I think also, what some brands get wrong, and I still call this branding, even though it seems like product development or services, and is that I think one of the things that really helped Wilson is we changed our R&D team versus just coming up with technologies and just pushing them out and try to market them.
Mm-hmm.
We actually inverted it and had consumer insights coming in to figure out what are we trying to solve? What do they want? And I think that it's subtle, but it's really important. And I think companies who win and have sustainable businesses are the ones that understand their consumers and what their needs are and what problems they're trying to solve for and what value they're creating versus the brand that just thinks I kind of sometimes call it art like it's more artistic and we're going to push this out and make them love it.
Right.
No, get what they want and what they need versus what you think they need, you know.
And that was an experience that I had during my Comcast days was Philadelphia would push out some initiatives to Chicago and roll it out. This is a pilot program. We need you to get some lessons learned from actual clients. We have a whiteboard, but we don't know how it works. So when you talk about the first advertisers on demand or on Comcast.net as a digital advertiser, Chicago was the leader in bringing in those lessons and attracting those advertisers, right? So that's
Yeah.
so important, to be able to take that data and then amplify it and say, okay, well, maybe what we had written on the board, maybe that's not the way to go.
Yep. I think also one thing where the sporting goods industry is going, and I call it sporting goods, but I'm thinking more even sports entertainment now.
Yeah.
You think of leagues and NFL, NBA, and so on. I heard this the other day, and it really connected with me that a lot of private equity is coming in now to invest in sports, and what I've heard when I talk to people is more that if you think about entertainment. And let's just use leagues now. Like, I watched the French Open all week last week. It was amazing.
Right.
And what they're saying is with AI, which Wilson loves AI, I love AI. We use it in product development and customer service and internally in the company, for efficiencies. But one of the things that's driving, I think, private equity investing into sports is because if entertainment ends up being created through AI, let's say, maybe movies, or we all know that there's already even music on Spotify that are AI bands. And
Sure.
I don't know where that'll go, but the one thing I do know is in sports that I don't think it can ever be AI. It has to be the human experience. So sports might be one of the most valuable entertainment options because nobody is going to go watch an AI driven football game or a basketball game or robots or whatever, right? You want the human experience. You want people who've worked hard, who have these, phenomenal skills and create these experiences for us.
Yeah.
And what I think that'll lead into is the whole experience of sports will probably, I think, is somewhere that you're going to see a lot of innovation. It'll be more than just like buying a ticket and going to like a Super Bowl or whatever. There'll be something around it there'll be a package. Like it might be with your Jets, but it also might be that your ticket provides, backstage or whatever meet and greets
The
with
entire
athletes.
experience.
It'll be the entire experience, and we're already seeing that, and there's only so many seats in a stadium,
Right.
too, that I think you're gonna start to see even experiences that are outside of the stadium that will create a better memorable experience for spectators than just sitting at home and watching it on their TV.
Well, and look at what all the franchises are trying to do now to duplicate the Wrigley experience.
Right.
Okay. It's an experience going down there. Sometimes good, sometimes not so good, depending on the outcome of the game and what you do after. But it is an experience. And you take a look at what the Bears are trying to do now. They're trying to create that experience. And then you have the home entertainment part of it as well, where all the availability to place wagers and theater style setting, big screen TVs, all the things that are geared towards someone who just wants to take in the experience from his or own home. And I think what the franchises are trying to do is to get out in front of that to ensure that they can engage with the fan before and after the buzzer goes off or the game is over, to get them there, right? Keep them engaged in it.
And I think too, industries that I worked in that I love the transformation in the entertainment as a spectator is both tennis and golf, and the fact that I could watch in the French Open last week on my streaming service any match that I wanted to. I didn't
Right.
have to just watch the one that was on
Right.
network TV, let's say. And there's players that I like and I want to follow, and you can do that in golf now a lot of times too, right? And follow your player and
Absolutely.
through the 18 holes instead of just watching
Right.
the main. So I think there's a lot of opportunities and innovation that's gonna grow out of that. I can see things happening.
So both of us working at major corporations throughout our career, we had some great opportunities, some great experiences, met some great people. Can you touch on some of the partnerships, the athletes, the people that you met,
Yeah.
experiences? Can you share some of that?
Yeah. I've been blessed because I worked in sports and I was able to go to a lot of events. I've been to, I think, over 20 Super Bowls. I've been to the Masters and things
Right.
like that. I'll say, one of the we were fortunate. Wilson always chose their athletes, to build brand equity and be aligned with our values, and we chose athletes that have great character. So I've been around some incredible athletes, and Roger Federer is one of those. He's just, I think he's a model for every human being that we should all behave the way he.
He seems like a great guy.
What I've been around him several times, and I'll say what he does that I don't see in a lot of these other elite athletes is he makes everyone around him feel better and more important. He's just got this skill. He's in front of the camera and behind the camera. He's always just a role model.
And think about what he needs to do before he walks on the court to maintain that level of excellence for a long time.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to the hard work we talked about.
Yeah.
And I know he did a commencement speech about 2 years ago, and one of the lines I share it a lot is that he said one of the things that disappointed him the most in his career is when people said that his tennis was effortless, because he did look effortless on the
Sure
court,
does.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, he glided around the court, and he said that that frustrated him the most because he said it was disrespectful to the hard work that he put in behind the scenes to get there and be one of the greatest players that ever played the game. And, sometimes we only see successful business people or, successful athletes, and we see them under the bright lights and holding trophies,
Right.
and we don't appreciate how hard they work behind the
What
scenes.
goes on when the lights are off and the camera's off, right?
And they do.
Sure.
And another great, I've been with them twice, and Padraig Harrington, who's won 3 majors
Yeah.
in golf, and I had the opportunity to go with him and his son to Patrick Mahomes' first Super Bowl,
Oh, wow.
and it was in Miami.
Yeah. Is that Frisco, San Francisco?
Yeah, I
Kansas
think
City?
it was
Yeah.
San Francisco.
Yeah.
It was funny because I kinda got to know Padraig. We had spent the day together through some of the tailgating parties and events earlier in the day, so, I was getting
Talk
to
about an experience. Super Bowl weekend is an experience.
yeah. We ended up going to see, like, at the tailgate party, Pitbull hanging out before the game, too. Probably oddballs at Pitbull.
You put right in. I'm into it. Yeah.
Myself, yeah. Um, but one of the things, and it was a learning experience for me because we all look up to these icons and, that play sports at that level and have success. And we were sitting in our seats and the national anthem went on, and this was Patrick Mahomes' first Super Bowl. And he was nervous and he looked like he was gonna throw up on the field, and I made a comment to Padraig. He was sitting next to me, and I just said, "Man, I hope, like, you know, Patrick Mahomes had an amazing season, like, he's an incredible quarterback. I hope he's gonna be able to show up today and be able to perform." I'm concerned because I was looking at him, and he looked over at me, and he said, when you play sports at the level that, like, him and I do," he goes, "you welcome that pressure. And if you have that pressure and nervousness, it means that you're about to do something good. You have an opportunity to achieve greatness." Really, where the light bulb went off with me, because even being an executive, I had that nervousness and things that we did, right? Like,
Right.
you're taking risk every day, making
Sure.
decisions and trying to grow a business. And I think I always felt a little bit like I wasn't supposed to feel that pressure and I wasn't supposed to have maybe that nervousness or anxiety. And I kind of felt maybe a little guilty of it, that I felt that I should feel more confident.
But you care about what you do, though.
Yeah, I care what I do, but what I learned from him was that that pressure, that anxiety or nervousness doesn't go away because you are trying to do something great,
Yeah.
and it's gonna be there, and it's not trying to make it go away, but it's how you respond to it. And you need to make sure that you respond in a way that it's productive, right? And it could be easy. We know a lot of people in our lives who it gets a little uncomfortable
Sure.
and they run from it.
Right.
They shut down and they don't take the risk. They don't take the job that might be scary,
Right.
that they don't feel like they're ready for. And to me, that opened my eye that these elite athletes that I thought were immune to this and just kind of showed up very confidently, it wasn't true. They have the same emotions that we do, but they just have the courage and bravery to push through 'em and make sure that they respond in a productive way and hopefully
Right.
reach their top performance.
Well, in that game, maybe Mahomes was a little bit uneasy the first 3 quarters, but certainly the 4th quarter, they
Yep.
came back,
He did come back.
right? So maybe there was something to it. Maybe, but certainly when the time was right, he rose to the occasion
Yes.
and he got across the finish line. And
But that was one of those great experiences that I'll never forget, sharing that conversation with him.
with an elite athlete like that, watching another elite athlete perform, right?
Now, I had one experience with him at the Glen Club,
Oh boy. Okay.
which,
Are we allowed to tell that story?
yeah, now I played 2 holes with him at the Glen Club, and I
Okay.
played number 1 and number 2,
Okay.
and we teed off from tips.
Okay.
And it's time like 20 handicap, which was scary. And my knees are knocking on the first tee box. And somehow I hit like this really good drive right down the
Yeah.
middle. And even it was one of those, the ball was rising. I was able to pick up my tee. It's still kind of going. And Padraig says, "Nice drive." And I'm like, "Phew, got that over." And then I hit a fairway wood on my second shot
Uh-huh. It's a par 5.
and par 5.
Right.
Yeah. and I'm a 7-iron out for me, and I hit a 7-iron within 10 feet of the hole, so I'm lying 3 from the tips, 20 handicap,
Okay. 3 jack?
and Padraig says he's gonna go for it in 2,
Oh, okay.
and on his second shot, he hits it in the high fescue because it's the link style
All right.
course, and it's been trimmed down since then, but it was really high. He's in the fescue on the left side of the green. He hits it out of the fescue into the fescue on the right side. So he's lying 3 in the fescue off the green. I'm lying 3 with a 10-foot putt. The whole time I'm just thinking, I can't wait to call my friends that I'm gonna beat Padraig Harrington on the first hole.
Yeah.
He hits it out of the fescue for a tap-in par, and I 3-jack. So I went bogey, but I went bogey, which I feel like was, with my handicap I played in sun. But I got ahead of me. I got over my skis, as they would say, and
All right.
I was already on the phone ready to call my friends and tell, I know what I'm gonna say, I beat him, but I should have stayed in the moment.
That's okay. And that's, you know what, we've all been there. I had a similar experience at Pebble Beach where you're on 18, and I went 4 and 2, and I wound up bogeying the hole because I 3-putted, and that's just like, oh man, really? You leave with that taste in your mouth like that. What other experience do you want to share about the Wilson day, or do you want to go to phase 4 and what you're doing since you left Wilson? First of all, how are you doing? What are you doing? And what is it that you want to do?
I'm doing well. I would say I do miss it a bit, and more than anything, I miss the people, and that's one of the things I tell everyone that I talk to that's still working is that you're gonna have all the achievements and accomplishments. I love those. I don't want to forget them, but I know they'll fade. But I think the people I worked with, I don't see that fading, and we're lucky. We're really close. I still get together with a lot of people.
Yeah.
It is still inside the first year, which I heard something the other day that there's like 4 phases, and the first phase is phase 1, which is the vacation phase. I feel like I'm still in the vacation
Okay.
phase. Everywhere is every day's a new day. I'm free. I'm enjoying myself a lot. But I will say I think I'm starting to move in to phase 2, which they say is the I don't see myself getting there, but they call it the depression phase, and it's the is this all this is? And maybe I need a little more structure, I need more purpose.
Right.
So I feel like I'm starting to head into that phase, and I'm going to try to figure out what that might be. I might do some part-time work with some companies as a fractional executive. um, I would like to get on some boards. I feel like I can add a lot of value with my finance and CEO background to be on independent boards or be advisory board member to help teams and mentor. So that's kind of, phase 2. And then 3 is basically finding whatever that purpose is and doing that. And then they say phase 4 is total freedom. I'll save the total freedom. That might be when I'm like 80 or something. We'll see. But what I have been doing, which is very rewarding, is and it started at Wilson with our internship program. I used to kick off the internship program, and I would have an hour with 20 to 30 interns every year. And I made a decision right up front that I can sit there and talk to them for an hour about Wilson, but that's not going to add maybe value and learning for the rest of their careers because I don't know how many might come back after their internship is over
Right.
and be full-time employees. So what I would tell them is I'm going to spend like 15 minutes on Wilson and tell you all about it, everything you need to know. But I want to spend the rest of the time on what I learned over those 30 years and going from an entry level accountant to the CEO of the company. And I tried to share the lessons that I learned and stories that they could relate to for that. So that's now transitioned into I've been speaking at high schools and universities and some professional groups too, but it feels like, 2 or 3 of these every month
Oh, that's
that I'm
great.
going somewhere and doing that, and it's the feedback's been phenomenal.
Yeah. Tell me more about some of the questions you're being asked and some of the messages that you're trying to communicate.
Yeah, so one of the things I do make sure that I leave enough time for Q&A, and the questions are great. They're really high quality, and people, they're not holding back, so I learn a lot from that too because I get to understand what concerns them, what questions they have, and I even did one, uh, a few weeks ago down into the city, and I was the keynote speaker, and then afterwards, I spent 2.5 hours after the event with students lined up, and I spoke to each one of them individually for 2.5 hours until they were flashing the lights like, "You guys need to go home." But, it was a great experience, I love it. If when we talk about what gives energy and takes it, I feel like it's, one of the things that fills me up. I enjoy it a lot, and I'd say the big questions are the number one question I always get, and I try to answer it proactively now because it comes up so often, is people ask me, like, "Did you have a plan when you started at Wilson to become the CEO of the company?" And I didn't, I just what I try to tell them is that I just tried to make good choices and keep learning and growing and heading in the right direction and doing good work, and I read this somewhere and I use it as an analogy, is that, it seems like every young person wants a roadmap, that they know what streets they're gonna go down, what the destination is, how to get there, and that's not gonna exist in a career because you can't predict things and look forward so much and try to map it out.
And if your life isn't mapped out by 25, you're a failure, right?
Right, and that's not true, there's
Yeah.
less time. But what I say is you should manage it more, and I read this in a book, more like a compass than a roadmap, because a compass is just
I like
making
that.
sure
Yeah.
that you head in the right direction and you're making good decisions, and you're not gonna find, that roadmap. I'd say that's probably the biggest question. The one that I try to get across to them a lot too is that, you really, and I've seen this with people around me, and it definitely was in my career, that every big opportunity that I ever had was because of change. It wasn't necessarily anything that I controlled. The only thing that I controlled was how I embraced that change, how I navigated through that change to get through the change curve as quickly as possible and,
Right.
emotionally strong and positive. And it felt like that's really what unlocked all of the opportunities because, if things stay the same, there's no opportunity, right? And it's funny, I was reflecting on this one time that I thought about it, and it's kind of interesting because every student I ever met, they all wanna be successful, they wanna grow, right? And yet, I think as human beings, we're wired for comfort and not change. And the only way you're gonna grow and find that opportunity is building that muscle to be able to embrace change, right? You're gonna have to take jobs that you might not be comfortable with. You might have to leave a company, go to another company. You might have to move to another city, you know? You might have to leave a job that feels secure and comfortable to take one that feels risky and
Right.
uncertain. And so I think that's really, an important thing that people have to embrace. Because if you don't build that muscle and skill to be able to accept change and move through it and get to the other side, there's no way you're gonna grow and have a great career.
No changes are permanent, but change is.
Yeah.
Have to throw in a Rush reference because they just started their 50-something tour last night, which we'll be going to in July uh, to pay a tribute to Neil Peart. Um, what would you change and adaptation? Obviously, we've known each other for 20 years. If you would have said 20 years ago to us, Joe and John, we'd be having a podcast at an airport, and I'm in the aviation industry, we wouldn't have believed that. Um, the message that you're trying to build and trying to really instill into those you're talking to now, um, what else is there? Change, adaptivity, um, kind of circle a loop on that.
I would think, what connects to all those things is, and people say this all the time, is to not just wait for the opportunities, but be ready for them. And I think,
Put yourself in a position to get lucky,
yeah,
right?
yeah, because, it feels like luck, but it's really not.
Well,
Like,
it's not, but you have to put yourself in that position to get that call or get that knock on the door like you did,
right.
right? You were open to change, right? And good things happen because of it.
You have to kinda seek it and see that it's
Yeah.
there, and then you have to be ready for it and put yourself in a position that you did all the things that you're ready, and you're never gonna be
Right.
completely ready. That, I don't think you can ever do anything until you actually do it. you're in your new role and you're probably nervous about it too, just like
Sure.
Patrick Mahomes going to the Super Bowl. And if you would have sat there and tried to plan, and not do it until you felt ready, you would have never been ready. You just had to
No.
jump in with both feet and trust yourself
Right.
that you were going to be resilient. You were going to do whatever it takes in the hard work. You were going to learn and grow. And that's what opens those opportunities. And then what's going to happen is it's going to be successful. And then somebody's going to tell you you got lucky. And they're not going to remember that he took a risk by changing, into a career that he felt that he had a passion for. He did the work to learn. I'm sure it's hard work and a lot of hours,
Right.
and nobody's going to see that. They're just going to say John got lucky.
I'm an 11 handicap right now. It's not because I'm playing a lot of golf.
Right.
I'm not practicing, right? Well, we're gonna change that a little bit this summer for sure, especially if you're at Geneva National. I need to get up there. It's been too long since I've been up there.
And I'm just trying to get to an 11 handicap. I didn't get to play hardly any golf.
Well, it's funny, when I was working a lot, I was a 5 because I was entertaining all the time. Now I'm not working and I'm 11. It's crazy. It's totally upside down.
That's one of the unfortunate things. Growing up in the finance and accounting side of the business is we never got to entertain and get to play as much golf. So
Yeah, you just see guys like me and their expense reports saying, "What are they doing now?" Right? You got to reel them in a little bit.
right.
Closing thoughts. How do you want to wrap this up today?
I'd just say, first of all, thanks for the opportunity to come out and hear my story, help me share my story. And I would say I'm open, to opportunities if I'm not just done. I'm looking for the next chapter of my career, and I want to continue to learn and grow. And I feel like I have a lot to offer, a lot to share, and I feel, so far speaking with students and that they're really open to learning and they want to grow. And I I would just say, I'm available for speaking, consulting, advisory boards, and I haven't really been trying really hard at this point to find that work. I've been on this vacation mode, but I'm going to start, putting some more discipline and work into it to make sure I can start to find these opportunities.
Well, and I think that's smart. You need to get your mind right, decompress a little bit, and say, okay, now it's time to go. Now I'm ready for this. I'm ready for that new chapter and that next phase. So
For sure.
I appreciate you sharing everything that you did today. It was great. You have a lot to offer. There's a lot of value that you're going to bring to the next endeavor, whatever it is. And I appreciate you coming on the Executive Airspace Podcast to tell your story.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, Joe.